Welcome, listeners, to www.ironradio.org, the website and podcast for all things strength sports and sports nutrition. With your hosts, Lonnie Lowry.
Remember, Phil is like a gnarled old oak tree held together with scar tissue and bone spurs.
Rob Fortney.
And I'm telling you, the pain that I would suffer was beyond excruciating.
And Phil Stevens.
Do it, Rob. You'll kill all those nerves.
Thanks for listening.
Welcome, Iron Radio listeners. This is Lonnie Lowry. I'm an exercise physiology and sports nutrition professor of about 20 years, and I'm a former competitive bodybuilder.
Hey, this is Phil Stevens. I'm a powerlifter, currently really heavy powerlifter. I run Strength Guild and a bunch of other stuff. So,
Hey, this is Dr. Mike T. Nelson, faculty member at the Carrig Institute, creator of the Flex Diet, CERT, a whole bunch of other stuff, and I'm back home in snowy and cold Minnesota.
Oh my God, you're home.
I'm actually home. Well, I'm kind of sort of on a travel ban for December, so I'm only going to teach RPR level 1 and 2 in Denver at the middle of the month. Other than that, I'm home the entire month.
Woohoo!
Yeah,
Well, it's
record.
Holiday season, you know.
Yeah.
I'm actually hoping for us just to have some shoot the shit episodes amongst ourselves in December. Like I'm really strung thin at work and stuff like this, and just the debating and the stuff that goes on whenever you try to be a change agent, it's taxing. And I kind of want to have some downtime where we can just talk shop a little. For example, Phil, you sound like you're overfed and feeling bloated. What's going on with you?
Your
man,
voice
I'm
sounds
big.
even bloated.
Oh, I am. Everything's bloated.
Yeah.
I'm trying to get to 290, which will be the heaviest I've been since, in a long time. So I'm at about 285.
Oh, wow.
I'm training for this meet in January. So, yeah, everybody looks at me and is like, holy moly, you're big. My squat feels amazing due to it. My deadlift, it's a little hard to get set up. But, I feel good. So the goal is I'm going to try and go for my first 800 squat. So I'm going to open at 7. So 7's feeling pretty easy. So that's kind of where I'm at. And the goal was trying to get to 290. Heaviest I've been is 285. So
Now
we'll
what
see.
time course? Because you were 270 not that long ago, right?
Not that long ago. I've been eating up for about 8 weeks.
Oh,
So
wow. Okay.
I've got until the end of January to gain another 5 pounds. So
You're good.
so we'll see. This is where it gets tough. So
Yeah.
at 280 for me, it's like, it takes twice as much work to add more weight.
Yeah.
So
Shove in
Anytime
one more
to get around
brownie.
the holidays.
yeah, exactly. So got a big meet in January.
You guys, I was talking to, I had 2 students. We did a carb loading lab. I don't know if I mentioned this at all, but one of them ate 9.5 grams per kg of carbs for 3 days, and the other one got up to 13 grams per kg. I mean, these guys, they're not big guys. I don't even think that's possible on a scale of a larger mammal, But they were saying it was so fun for the first day, and day 2 it was kind of fun, and now I don't want to do that again for a long time. And I thought, you know what? I know guys who do that for weeks on end.
Holy
moly,
moly,
kids.
I'd have to have 1,650 grams of carbs. Whew.
Oh my God.
That'd be rough.
But you know what I'm saying? Like, now, because they're dropping their protein a little bit, and fat, of course, in order to do it because they're carb loading. But like the force feeding stuff, I thought, it's not fun, is it?
No, anybody can eat like a huge one day. It's doing it that day and then the next day and the next day. And the one thing I had to figure out, like, today is my big squat day. So basically I have to get all my food in last night. Because if not, I can't. It goes bad if I wake up and try to eat a couple hours before that big. So I'll just snack in the morning. So I ate big last night, and then I won't really eat a meal until after we're done. So
yeah, that makes sense. I mean, listeners, imagine eating 3 plates of Thanksgiving dinner and then trying to caffeinate and go to the gym with that in your belly. That's good.
And it's just it
not going to work.
Yeah. So.
Wow.
Yep.
How much weight did your students gain, Lonnie, over a couple days? Do you know?
Oh, yes, I do. We measured all that stuff. We even did segmental bioimpedance and looked at their arm, water content. Yeah, it was cool. I'm trying to remember. I got the labs in my backpack. I got to grade them.
That's all right.
But one of them was 5.5 pounds.
Oh,
Yeah.
Yeah, and the other one was similar. I think it was similar. Because they
and what was
started.
their weight before? Like, what's their weight range?
These guys in pounds, they're like low 70 kilos, like 160 pounds guys.
Oh, okay,
you know.
cool. Yeah.
One's a cyclist, you know.
Adding 5 pounds on a 170 pound body is not small. So.
No,
Yeah.
and like I said, it was cool to see, you know, with the segmental bioimpedance, you know, the water content in there, because 3 grams of water stored with each gram of glycogen, all that whole thing, and you can see it, you know, and it's just, and it's an advanced class, so that's kind of the whole thing is we're exploring stuff like that. Like, can we detect it? And if we don't detect it with our limited equipment, why? You know, what control variables are at work? And it's just a critical thinking kind of thing. But yeah, it was fun, and it stuck in my mind. I thought about you, Phil, and I thought about Rob too, when they're like, "Oh, it's not fun. You know, I don't want to do that again." I'm like, "Well, I you know, that's like training wheels. What compared to what I see some of these guys do, like you said, Phil, day after day after day."
Yeah, and I mean, there's a reason that right after the meets, I drop weight. I'm done at that point. It's like I'm done eating. I don't want to eat anymore.
Yeah.
So.
And you're putting on that too, Lonnie. If people are getting a DEXA or more body comp measurements done on themselves, a lot of times they forget to standardize their nutrition before. Because if you went from a low carbohydrate to a high carbohydrate diet, you can swing that by many pounds, and that shows up as fat-free mass because it's not fat.
Oh, right, for sure. Well, in fact, one of the things, that's some of all the things we're exploring, right, is we actually figured, based on their carb intake, about how many grams of glycogen they had, how much they would have when they loaded, you know, let's say they doubled or got 2.5 times their normal storage. And then you can actually predict the weight gain with a fair degree of accuracy, you know, because of the 3 grams of water for each gram of surplus glycogen, right? So, yeah, it's kind of neat. Anyway, my whole point with that was the big eats and how they weren't ready for it, you know. Okay. A couple of studies here, everybody, and then I guess I was remiss in saying that we're going to have a sort of a mini tutorial here. Phil's going to talk about adding 20 pounds on your deadlift in a day, potentially. But 2 studies, one's on coffee and one is on protein. Probably not a surprise.
Strength and muscle sport news.
This first one says why we shouldn't like coffee, but we do. Weirdly, people with a higher sensitivity to bitter caffeine taste drink more. This is from Northwestern University. It says, why do we like the bitter taste of coffee? Bitterness evolved as a natural warning system, right? So by evolutionary thinking, logic, we should just spit it out if it's bitter. But as it turns out, people that are more sensitive to the bitter taste of caffeine, the more coffee they drink. And this is right in line with what I'm planning to do in the spring, where we're looking at different compounds in coffee and what it does to the taste and all that sort of thing. Let's see. A new study from Northwestern Medicine and QIMR Berghofer Medical Research Institute in Australia. The sensitivity to this bitter taste of caffeine is a genetic variant that was previously established, I guess. But it says consumers acquire a taste or an ability to detect caffeine due to a learned positive reinforcement, that is, the stimulation that's elicited by that caffeine. So, in other words, normally, some people are more sensitive to this bitter taste, but you almost train yourself to detect it, right? Because you get rewarded by, a good gym session or some dopamine release or, whatever it is. This reminds me of like the movie Princess Bride, where he learns to taste iocane powder, which is supposed to be completely undetectable. It says, let's see, there is a distinct bitter flavor to caffeine, and coffee drinkers learn to associate quote-unquote good things with it, says Marilyn Cornelis. She's an assistant professor at Northwestern. In this study population, it says the big coffee drinkers consumed low amounts of tea. And they're trying to, at first you might think, is it some part of their genetic taste preferences? But it says that could be just because they were drinking so much coffee. The study also found people sensitive to other bitter flavors like quinine, like in, what is it, that spritzer water stuff. But those things didn't, it didn't drive them to drink more coffee. In fact, if you're sensitive to quinine, then you actually avoid coffee. And it talks about how some people with certain of these genetic variants for taste sensitivity would avoid like red wine because they're just too sensitive to the bitterness. The findings suggest our perception to bitter tastes, informed by our genetics, contributes to the preference for coffee, tea, and alcohol, Cornelis said. This was a sample of 400,000 men and women from the UK. But they actually used certain techniques and their previous knowledge of these genetic variants from twins studies in Australia to try to get to more causality. This wasn't just loose correlations, I guess. Anyway, it says, taste has been studied for a long time, but we don't know the full mechanics of it, Cornelis said. So I just thought that was sort of interesting, again, because it's one of the things that I'm looking at. What is the taste profile? In fact, we're getting some of the non-disclosure agreements back and everything from the IronRadio listeners that are going to use this brew method that we're talking about, and part of it is a taste test, right? And it'll be interesting if they detect bitterness or lack of bitterness and that kind of thing. So,
I had a quick question on that, Lonnie. Do we know how that would possibly translate into health benefits? Thinking that if you're someone who genetically is maybe more predetermined to like bitter coffee, do you respond better in terms of other health profiles or blood glucose or other markers to that compared to someone who doesn't have that?
Yeah, that's the kind of thing where someone like you or I would have to come along and relate it to health variables, right? Because this is just genes versus taste.
Exactly.
Yeah. Well, I think that's
that'd be fascinating.
It is, and I think that's sort of the niche that I'm trying to pursue in my lab, right? Is look at the food science, but marry it with actual nutrition science, or health.
Genomics, yeah.
Yeah. I'm not going to get too deep into the genomic side of things, but yeah, what you taste in coffee, how does coffee taste, and then what does it do to your training and your sleep and all that kind of stuff? And you're right. And how do they correlate? For sure.
Yeah. Cool.
Okay. This next one is from the Journal of Nutrition, a high-tier journal. And I don't think it's going to surprise either of us, but you almost have to come out with this stuff on a regular basis to keep the hysterics down. Changes in kidney function do not differ between healthy adults consuming higher protein compared with lower or normal protein diets. A systematic review and meta-analysis. So this is literally just a couple of weeks old. From the Journal of Nutrition. It's from DeVries and colleagues. Stu Phillips is on this too.
Oh, yeah.
So the background, it says high protein diets. In fact, they say higher protein diets, and that's funny because that's something that I always made sure I said in the book or a presentation, because if you say high protein diets, people want to know what you mean by that. And if you say higher, you're just saying, listen, above like the 0.8 grams per kg, But higher protein diets are advocated for several reasons, including the mitigation of sarcopenia, and a lot of our listeners know that's, of course, muscle loss with aging and whatnot. But their effects on kidney function are less clear. Methods: we conducted a systematic review and a meta-analysis of trials comparing high protein, and here's higher protein diets, and here's how they defined it: more than 1.5 grams per kg of body weight, or more than or equal to 20% of all your calorie intake, or simply more than 100 grams a day. That's how they did it. Now, more than 100 grams a day, that's like very typical to me. That's not much protein. But I think you got to think about the size of individuals and whatnot as well. And then they compared that with people on normal to lower protein diets, and then they actually defined that as greater than or equal to 5% less energy intake from protein per day compared to the high protein group. Okay. So relative to the high group. Randomized controlled trials compare the effects of high protein versus normal to low protein of more than 4 days duration on GFR, right? Glomerular filtration rate. How well do your kidneys clear waste products from your blood? And they looked at adults that did not have kidney disease. 2,144 abstracts were reviewed. That makes me wonder if some of mine weren't in there. But anyway, then they went through and they selected some full text reviews. They did some direct intervention trials, all this kind of stuff, as far as what they looked at. Here it is. Analyses were conducted using post-intervention or post-GFR, again, kidney filtration, and the change in GFR from pre to post intervention. So sometimes they just looked at post stuff, which is what I always looked at, right? Because I just looked at people who were already eating large amounts of protein and compared them to the lower. But also they looked at, again, the change. So if they had pre and post data, they would look at that up or down in kidney filtration because of the higher protein intervention. It says there was a linear relation between protein intake and glomerular filtration rate in the post-only comparison. It correlated 0.332, so that's about 10% of GFR being accounted for by the high protein. That's very much in line with what I actually saw when I was looking at this stuff, in the post-only kind of stuff. That you have a little bit more kidney filtration, and in fact, if you look at it, urine outputs are quite a bit higher. In people who are consuming a lot of protein. The average person might pee about 1.5 liters a day, something like that. I had some guys in the high protein group, they were peeing 2.5, 3 liters a day. So I'm not surprised that there's more filtration there. But it says there was not a linear relation between protein intake and a change when they had the pre to post comparison. So post only, when they just look at that, there was a significant increase in GFR, but if they look pre to post change after a high protein intake, there was no significant change in GFR. So they went on to say, our analysis indicates that higher protein intakes do not adversely influence kidney function on GFR in healthy adults. And again, I think that's important because how many times do you hear, someone who's less familiar with the literature? It might be a health educator or a dietitian or a nurse, or I've heard, various health professionals say, oh, those high protein diets, all those meatheads and their weightlifting and this and that, they, they're killing themselves, hurting their kidneys. A lot of that goes back to what's called the Brenner hypothesis, which is if you ask your kidneys to filter more, that's stress and it harms them. But anybody in exercise science knows better. I mean, if you ask your biceps to do more, it doesn't tear right off the bone. It hypertrophies, in a healthy person. And that's kind of what I think people are slowly coming to realize with kidney function is asking them to do a little bit more because you have a higher protein diet. If you're healthy and, your glomerulus, your filtration apparatus in your kidneys, it's not gummed up with sugars because you're diabetic, or it's not sort of blown out because of hypertension for decades. Normal kidneys, you're just asking them to filter some more. So that Brenner hypothesis was only a hypothesis, and for whatever reason, a lot of people just ran with this idea. They looked at damaged diabetic hypertensive kidneys, and those, you don't want to flood a huge amount of protein in those bodies. That kind of azotemia, that buildup of nitrogenous substances in your blood. Yeah, now you're asking damaged kidneys to get rid of it. But healthy people, no, it's not going to hurt them.
I think the Brenner hypothesis, wasn't that like 1954?
Oh, it's old. Yeah.
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 It's like quite a while ago.
Exactly. And like I said, I mean, it's contrary to our entire field that if you apply a stimulus and you apply a stressor, that automatically it's harmful. Well, my God, then, Phil is just being unethical. He's just hurting all of his crew, instead of...
Killing his muscles.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, that's adaptation after a stimulus or a little bit of overload. That's the whole point of what we do. And I think if they would have just talked to an exercise physiologist, they might have had a different mindset there. I don't know. So, yeah, yet another nail in the coffin, right, that high-protein diets harm healthy kidneys. So thank you, Stu Phillips, and Michaela DeVries, and all these other authors, too. So thank goodness. Okay, I'll tell you what. Let's go to break. When we come back, we're going to check in with Phil, and we're going to get some tips on putting 20 pounds on a deadlift, more or less in a single session. So we'll be back.
I can't stop feeling. Some of us don't understand how lucky we are to be living in this land.
Hi listeners, this is Rob Fortress Fortney. I'm here to remind you that as the holiday season approaches and your thoughts turn to giving, we would like you to keep Iron Radio in your thoughts.
Over the past several years, there have been hundreds of listener comments hoping that Iron Radio stays on the air for years to come. Iron Radio is here for you. But as with any public radio type format, the show is listener supported. That's where you come in. For just $4 a month, you become a supporting member, keeping your weekly dose of education, experts, and gym talk flowing. Just go to www.ironradio.org and click on the $4 monthly subscribe button near the bottom of the page.
Or click the donate button at the right of the page for a one-time donation. You are the Iron Brotherhood and Sisterhood.
Of course, not everyone can afford to be a supporting member or a significant one-time donor. But for those of you willing to pitch in, $4 per month or $50 just once, we're about to sweeten the deal. Become a supporting member or major donor between now and January, and a limited number of you will receive a gift worth over $20. And we will never forget our existing supporters. Simply email me via ironradio.org, and I'll send you a free seminar from Dr. Lowry on how to significantly and realistically boost your testosterone levels. Help your Iron brothers and sisters who cannot pitch in but deserve better internet programming in our sports. And happy holidays.
Hey listeners, this is Dr. Lonnie Lowry. If you've ever had anyone critique you on your protein intake as part of your weightlifting lifestyle, oh, you poor meathead, all that extra protein is going to rot your kidneys or weaken your bones or dehydrate you or give you gout or who knows what. There is a book available. You could simply Google CRC Press and Lowry. And what I've done is reach out to experts all over the world and create a book, a single compendium that you can hold up and say, this is why I consume extra protein. This can be very valuable when you're being quote-unquote educated by various professionals on the topic. There's an enormous amount of literature in this book on the safety, the effectiveness, how protein works in cells, the history of protein and weight trainers, much more. So again, please check out CRC Press and Protein and Lowry. You can just Google that, and I do, full disclosure, I do make a small single-digit royalty on the book, but that's not why I did it. I did it so we can all have something, our particular population, to both defend what we do and to inform our nutrition and our eating. Thanks. Iron Radio is, of course, primarily a podcast. But over the years, there have been technical glitches calling for backup streaming and listeners who wanted the convenience of other sources of audio content. Toward this end, Iron Radio is now simulcast and backed up on YouTube. If needed, please search Lawnman07 or Iron Radio from within YouTube. There's not much video, but if you like to listen through YouTube on a Roku or other living room device, there you go.
Like your weekly fix of Iron Radio? In addition to being a popular institute on iTunes, we are also on email. Simply go to www.ironradio.org and sign up for the voluntary email. You'll get a once per week email, no more, that's little more than the show notes and a link to the audio. So go for it.
All right, everybody, we are back, and we're going to magically increase your deadlift by 20 pounds in like 10 minutes here. So, first off, I'd like to say the only way to really make somebody stronger, like when I throw seminars, and hell, anybody throws seminars, they all come in expecting to hit PRs. The first thing I tell people is that's probably not going to happen. In some cases it will, but in those cases it's usually a form issue. We can fix form issues, form leaks, and make a drastic increase. But as far as programming stuff, which is a lot of what I'm known for, programming takes time to show its teeth. So, we can't put you through a session and automatically make you 20 pounds stronger due to, the adaptation from that one session. It's just not going to happen. So,
Yeah.
But that said, I mean, the deadlift is probably the one that I see butchered the most by people that just don't. There's not as much coaching on it, I don't think, and there's not as many people that know what they're doing. There's been a lot of great tutorials on squats and things like that, and that people can go watch. There's not quite as much on deadlift, and it's just, I don't know, it's just a hard lift, and it's one of those lifts that there's basically a squat. You know, you see people go a little wider, a little narrower, but the deadlift, there's so many variations. There's high hip, low hip, wide stance, narrow stance. You don't see that much variation in squat as you do in deadlift. So, I mean, the number one thing I like to do with people is explain some basic physics. I get out and get to the drawing board and, you know, talk about lever arms and things like that, and we ID what each person's body's like. For me, I'm really short torsoed. Like, we measured my torso versus my leg length, and my legs from hip to the bottom of my foot is literally almost exactly 2 times as long as my torso. So wow. I've got really long legs and a really short torso. And to explain this to people, it's like if you wanted to pick up a sledgehammer, are you going to choke up on it, or are you going to grab it by the end of the handle?
Okay.
We want to do a sledgehammer is a lot lighter if we choke up towards the end of the handle. So the same thing needs to happen in your lifts. Basically, you want to load your smallest lever arm with as much weight. You want to bend at the smaller lever arm more. So for me, I want to bend at the hip more because the weight is not multiplied as many times out as they would if I bend my legs a bunch. Every inch those things bend, the weight gets multiplied many more times because they're so long. If that makes sense. Mm-hmm. So, therefore, I'm a high hip deadlifter. You know, I have very little knee bend, and I bend over at the waist, and that also kind of automatically puts the bar where I want it to be. If I were to bend at the legs a lot, my shoulders would be back behind the bar. We want your scapula right in line with the bar, over midfoot, and things like that. So, and if somebody was the opposite, let's say somebody's really long torsoed, and they try to barely bend at the knee, and they bend a lot at the hip, they're going to be pitched way out in front of the bar. So they're creating a longer lever arm there. So that's kind of number one, is we identify what kind of person you are. And then there's weird freaks out there, like, you know, Ed Cohn, they got long arms, big hands, but he's short. So, I mean, so it's number one, identifying what kind of person you are and where your hips should be. From there, it's teaching people, and I don't know why this is so hard, but I like to call a deadlift a pull and not a lift, because you start thinking lift and people automatically drive off the floor and they're lifting it up. So what we see is their hips shoot up and they get out in front of the bar, and then kind of activating the glutes and the hamstrings is secondary. And then it's like, oh no, now I need to pull back. So what I like to get people thinking about is right off the floor, we're pulling back as soon as we can. Because if you get caught at the knee where you're pitched way out in front of the bar, it's really hard. If I've come back from the start, and by the time it reaches my knees, I'm behind the bar, it's going to be easier to lift. So right from the start of the lift, our whole goal is to get shoulders back in line with your butt. And there's a weird thing that happens. It's a little hard to do over the air here, but if you guys are listening, everybody knows knee extension, knee flexion, hip extension, hip flexion. In a deadlift, no matter how I'm built, even me, I have a little bit of knee flexion. So if we set up in a deadlift, you can do, if I tell you to extend your knees, you can do that. Now, if we set back up and I tell you to extend your hips without extending your knees, you can't. So basically, if all we think about is extending our hips, the knees happen.
Okay.
You know, you can easily extend the knee without hip extension. It's just something that you can do. You can't extend your hips without knee extension. So the only thing I get people to worry about is extend your hips, you know, pull back, you know, and the knees are just going to happen. Because if we extend our hips without knee extension, we fall on our ass. You literally fall over. Okay. So that's kind of it. And then other than that, it's tightness in the bar. So it's something we called, I call wedging. I learned this from Pavel way back in the day.
Yeah.
So he teaches wedging, and it's being active with the bar. So what we normally see is people come up and they yield to the bar. So they'll go to deadlift and they kind of squat down to it and they're loose against it. And then they pull. So all of a sudden you have no weight in your hands, and then you get hit by whatever's on the bar, 500 pounds or whatever. So you may be in a good position, theoretically, when we're looking at you set up, but because you have no weight in your hands, the minute you pull, usually you get pushed out onto your toes, because all of a sudden you have 0 pounds, and then you're hit by 500. That pushes you out, and your hips shoot up, and then you're just behind the game.
Oh, I see what you're saying. As opposed to like the tension ramping up, it just smacks into you.
As opposed to, you just get hit by 500 pounds.
Yeah.
Whereas what I like people to do is one of two things. Usually it's grab the bar high hipped and we pull up on it. So let's say I have 500 pounds on the bar. I'm pulling up with about 200 pounds of pressure, and then I'm slowly setting back against the bar. So I've already got that weight in my hands. And wedging, you can't really do it unless, like me, I need to have over 280 pounds on the bar. Because if not, if I'm wedging correctly, the bar's just going to move with less than my body weight. Because basically I'm getting as much of me behind the bar as I possibly can. So if it's less than your own body weight, it's going to move. But we set against the bar, not down to the bar. So you're pulling some weight before you pull hard. And the other way to do it is I just have people set up, and they'll have them pull a little bit. Okay, give me 10% or 20%. And then once you have that, now you're tightened. Now you pull hard. So basically you preload before you go hard.
Is that like taking the slack out of the bar? People
pretty much
similar.
Yep. Yeah, you're taking the slack out of the bar. Because if not, you just get hit by it. You get automatically pitched on your toes. Now we're doing the opposite thing that we wanted to. Now we've created knee extension without hip extension. Now you've got this huge lever arm at the hips, and your back's loaded and your hamstrings are loaded. So, I mean, those are the main things. And then you've got weird people that I have about. Sumo is all the rage right now, seemingly. Seemingly, it's all the rage. It's like getting a lot of YouTube and Instagram play. But one of the big open powerlifting, it kind of took the place of powerliftingwatch.com. Just did they like interviewed all the powerlifters across all federations, and it was still much more of them do conventional, even though it seems like a lot of people are doing sumo. There is a certain amount of people that sumo fits them right. I have a few lifters. Out of all my lifters, I think I got 4 that pull sumo. And this is usually people that have really long torsos, because what we're trying to do again, how do we get that really long torso to not be loaded in a huge way? We keep it as upright as possible. So basically we put them in a squat position, kind of in a wide stance squat. So we have them drop their hips down, push their knees apart. They're getting their crotch as close to the bar as they can, and then their torso straight up and down. So we're not pitching that long lever arm over and multiplying that weight by a bunch of times. So, and again, the problem with that is most people do it wrong, and you see this weird stiff-legged deadlift sumo variation. So, whereas a sumo, when it's done right, usually it feels like a ton off the floor, and you need to fight to stay in position, and then it moves, and then all of a sudden it just comes up. So, it's much more of a technical lift. There's less margin for error. Like if you mess up on a sumo, you're just done. Whereas if you mess up, like if I shoot my knees up a little bit or my hips up a little bit on a conventional deadlift, usually I can fight through it. That just doesn't happen in sumo. If that bar pitches out in front of you an inch or two, you're usually going to fall over, and a lot of that's due to the foot placement and everything. You're real wide and usually toes pointed out to the side some, so you don't have as much forward and rear balance. So if you get pushed forward a little bit, you're just going to fall.
That makes sense.
So those are kind of the main things. I mean, so loading the bar, learning to wedge against the bar, or preloading the bar, or taking the slack out of the bar, whatever you want to call it. And then just identifying where's the right position for you. Most people, from what I've seen, are deadlifting way too low hipped. So what I like people to do is grab the bar, and no matter how they're built, we start dropping their hips until their knees start shooting forward. And once their knees start pushing forward, we stop them there, and then we have them set their back. So, and now they can pull back. So what you see is usually most people set way too low, and they've got a bunch of knee extension that goes clear out over the bar. And this works great when it's light. The bar kind of travels in this path around the knees and then back up. What happens when it's heavy is they pull and their hips shoot slowly, and then the bar starts moving. Because you can't pull back if your knees are pushed out over the bar right from the start. So basically we want to be able to pull back right from the start. And that's kind of the gist of it as far as adding 20 pounds. It's usually just fixing a form issue, which a lot of people have them.
Yeah.
So.
No, this is one thing where, admittedly, like you said, I love audio, but it's harder to do this without
it's
some
real
visual.
hard to do it without little pictures and stuff.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, or little videos. But I mean, if anybody wants to do this, just, hey, come to my facility. But
now, so I know you already touched on this in part here, but so one of the things that I remember that you were talking about was like I'm not good at deadlifting. I never was, but I never put a lot of time into it. That's not saying I would ever be good, even if I did. But there seemed to be, my understanding was, isn't there some controversy about like sitting back, like once you get set up, like sitting back into your hips and actually not just having vertical motion, but almost like a 45-degree angle backwards. Do you know what I'm saying?
Well, we want as much as you behind the bar as we can.
Behind the bar, sense. Right? Okay, yeah.
And that's why I said it's that's where the wedging comes in and things like that. And it doesn't work until there's more than you on the bar. So we need that big counterbalance in front of you.
Counterbalance.
The heavier, the heavier it gets. Like when I have a 700 bar on the bar, I can sit way back. I can lean back against the weight and pull because I've got 700 pounds in front of me, not letting me fall over.
Right.
If I have 225 on the bar, when I pull back real hard, I'm going to have to take a step back. So we want you to use you. You're using your own body weight to help lift the weight. So
that helps.
Get you back behind the bar. Basically, we set up, we get tight, we pull that slack out of the bar, and from there, it's just literally I just try and keep people think, get your shoulders behind your butt. That's your only goal. If you get your shoulders behind your butt, you made the lift. Any lift, and it's helpful for me with people to just teach them that you can break them down. Any lift is the creation of lever arms and then the erasure of lever arms. Now we need to figure out how to do that in an efficient fashion. So we don't want a bunch of, you've got a bunch of extra, and you'll see this in the squat where people have a bunch of extra hip extension or flexion. They're bending at the hip too much and they're not bending at the knees enough. So they think they're going low, but what's going low is their shoulders, not their butt. If that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
So, we break that down. Now, how do we, for your body type, how do we do this as efficiently as possible? So,
it makes a lot of sense to me about, I think a lot of people, they think about joints and muscles instead of like yours, like resistance arms,
Yeah.
Like when I had a student the other day, he goes, "Oh, you mean like don't hold your gym, don't walk around campus with your gym bag at arm's length. You would bend your elbows and bring it closer to you." I said, "Yeah, that's kind of the idea of a resistance arm, And it's fascinating to me how you guys you'll take that and you can have regardless of the number of plates on the bar, that can be much lighter or much heavier depending on how much you change the resistance arm. Right, the distance from the pivot point, from the fulcrum to the actual bar. I think that's fascinating. That's so clever. I don't know.
And that's what it's all about. I mean, when you're talking about now we need to talk about a strength athlete versus like a physique athlete. If I've got a physique athlete and we're looking to do as much building as we can, and our goal isn't move as much weight as we can, but it's potentially do as much damage to the tissue as we can, we're probably going to load up those long lever arms. We can use less weight on the bar, but it's going to be more resistance because it's like doing a dumbbell fly versus a dumbbell bench.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? When you're doing a dumbbell fly, the only reason it's harder is because you've created a really long lever arm.
Yeah, it stays at arm's length. Yeah, throughout.
Yeah. You're creating a long lever arm for your pec, so 20 pounds feels like 50.
Right, yeah.
So for somebody like me and my assistants work even, what do I need to do? I probably don't need to attack my strengths. I need to work on my long legs.
Right.
And make sure they're strong.
Right.
So that's things like that.
It's almost like the concept of a cheap buzz. Like you could use less weight and get a similar amount of tension on that muscle for growth.
Yeah.
For the bodybuilders. Yeah.
Yeah, and for me, that's like the difference. My torso is, I don't remember the numbers. Let's say my torso is 24 inches long and my friggin' legs are 48, just for easy math. For me, a good morning's really easy. Because in a good morning, the weight is loaded on my shoulders, and I'm bending at the hip. Mm-hmm. So I've good morning 675 pounds. If I tried to do a good morning, if I tried to do a 675-pound reverse hyper with the load down on my ankles, it ain't going to happen.
Yeah, right.
Even though essentially I'm moving at the same joint.
Right. Because such a long resistance arm.
Different lever arms.
Yes, the weight is tripled, because the lever arm is so much longer. Mm-hmm. So what do I need to do in my assistance work? I need to attack that long lever arm, make that stronger. So,
yeah.
But that's kind of where we do. I mean, we come after the only way that I can really add 20 pounds to a lift is fix an issue that you didn't know you had. So, and just maximize you for your own leverages and your mistakes you're doing in your form. So,
yeah, I remember when I was just looking at different slides and whatnot and teaching some of the basics of this, thinking about I would think about a horizontal distance, between the joint and the bar, and how you're trying to, like if you look at a photograph from the side, and how you're trying to minimize that resistance arm, and it just makes the whole thing easier.
Well, that's the same thing why you saw in like equipped powerlifting. Why they took the really wide stance and they drive their knees out. They're able to shorten the distance between the knees and the hips.
Yep.
So there's less of a lever arm, and they're stopping just at parallel. You're creating as few lever arms as you can. You want everything in your body, every joint, you want it as close to the center of gravity as it can possibly be while completing the lift under the rules that are there. So
I just think that's the kind of thing. Yeah, so few people, I mean, other than competitive powerlifters, would really think about this stuff. I don't think bodybuilders would think about this stuff for the most part. Like getting as flat as you can against the bar. Things like that, and just the enormous performance advantage that imbues.
Yeah.
So.
Well, and that's why, honestly, basically, we're always looking to make our main lifts, for me, squat, bench, deadlift, make those as easy and efficient as possible. And then all of our assistance lifts are usually as hard as they can possibly be.
Yeah.
So look at a stiff-legged deadlift versus a regular deadlift. We're purposely putting the bar way out in front of us, and creating a long lever arm, things like that. So, we're attacking weaknesses with really hard lifts. So.
Right. That's cool.
How do you know for like foot stands? So, for example, recently, like last May, I did a session with Jay Ashman down in Kansas City. So check him out if you're in that area. Yeah. And I have tried like all sorts of different deadlift variations. And he had me try one where your heels are almost together. They're externally rotated, kind of almost similar to what you do, Phil.
Yeah.
And the first time I looked at it, I went, that looks just dumb. But I'm like, I don't know. I'll try it. What the heck? And I tried it, and I'm like, oh, wow. I can get out of the way of my knees more because my femurs are so freaking long.
Yes, and that's...
was that kind of more of a special case, I would assume?
Well, generally people like myself and you who have really long legs, really long femurs, we're going to be narrower stanced. It gives our knees somewhere to go. Yeah. We can kind of push them out a little bit. We're narrower stanced, and we're more high-hipped.
Yes.
And you have people, now we start going the other way, and you've got somebody with shorter femurs, shorter legs, longer torso. They're going to be lower hipped and a wider stance. They have a wider base, and they're going to drive off the floor with their quads. They kind of turn the deadlift into a squat, per se. So, and usually with us, with me and you, the weight's going to be really light off the floor. And where it's going to get hard a little bit is at lockout. And that's because we're so bent at the hip. Our hamstrings are strung tight off the floor. We get a lot of drive off our floor. We don't get much with our quads, but we get a lot of pull with our hamstrings off the floor. We get it to the knees. Now they're loose. So we're finishing out. Whereas people that are lower hipped and shorter femured off the floor, they get a lot of quad drive off the floor.
Sure.
But it's hard. It's hard to break the weight and get it moving. Once they get it moving, it gets to the knees, boom, it's just able to lock out. They can activate their glutes the minute it crosses their knees.
Yeah.
We're able to activate our glutes off the floor. So you get those big muscles just pushing hard off the floor, and then everything kind of gets slack at the knee.
This is sort of like the conventional versus sumo thing. It's the resistance arc, right? Like how like the whole idea of a Nautilus cam is it makes it harder or lighter in one part, of the range of motion, and that's what you guys are doing. It's funny to me because you're doing it with just dead weight, just barbell,
Yeah.
But the way that you set up and the choice of movement, you can actually change the resistance in that, range of motion. The resistance arc, if you will.
And that's where somebody like what Mike's doing and things like that with the narrower stance. Like a lot of my time is usually spent doing rack work because I know I'm strong off the floor. It flies off the floor.
Yeah, that makes sense.
It's from mid shin, knee up. So I'll spend a lot of time mid shin, below the knee, things like that, getting strong there. Because the floor strength is there. Because my hamstrings are strung tight.
Yeah.
So
work on your weakness. Yeah. Mechanically. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's either that or even get faster off the floor. So
yeah, because that's what surprised me when I did test a max. It was a couple of weeks ago. They came off the floor much faster than what I had been used to.
Yeah,
and then about 3-ish, maybe 4-inch, like just about a little bit above mid shin. I was like, oh my god, I just ran into a brick wall.
Yep. Yeah,
I was like, whoa, that's different.
That's what I used to judge all my openers off what I could hit at mid shin.
Yeah.
Because if I can hit it at mid shin, that's the hardest spot for me.
Yep.
It's 4 or 5 inches off the floor. It comes off the floor real good. So, yeah, I mean that's kind of where it's at. You're basically strung tight like a drum off the floor, and then all of a sudden, whoa! Now everything's loose. So. Yeah, it's just another case of just different people, different lever arms, and so.
Yeah. So to wrap up, when we talk about sort of tongue in cheek, put 20 pounds on your deadlift in a day, have you ever seen that happen? Like somebody come in and like their form's atrocious, and you work with them, and they really do.
Oh yeah.
No, I know that's relative.
No,
it's obviously relative to their baseline weight.
For sure. No, we've had people come in all the time that automatically hit. We adjust something, they hit it. The problem is. Even a form change is hard because what happens is, let's say I make a drastic form change and 10 minutes later we go really heavy. You revert back to old movement patterns when things get hard. So basically now we need to practice that new movement pattern, make it that habit, because when things get tough, we revert back to just what we know. So and that's where it's going to come into, okay, now you need to go practice this new form and get used to it to where that's automatic. You need to make that your new automatic. So, but yeah, definitely seen it in squat and deadlift. I mean, where people come in and hit all-time PRs. So, and I don't know, half that. I honestly think that half the time when people come into my place and hit a PR, it's less to do with form and more to do with environment.
Oh, sure.
If that makes sense. They're amped up.
Yeah, all that stimulus coming in.
Yeah.
New people, heavy metal.
We've got heavy metal donuts and a bunch of people looking at you.
Right.
So.
That sounds like a t-shirt. Heavy metal donuts and a bunch of people looking at you.
Yeah.
Yep.
I just have one last quick question. What do you do with grip stuff? Do you force people to go double overhand for a while? Do you let them use a mixed grip? Do you
generally we go
look
double
at discrepancy between them?
Generally we go double overhand as long as we can.
Okay.
So like with a totally brand new person, we're always double overhand, and I start people off light.
Yeah,
I'm not taking the new person. Okay, we're maxing. It's over. It's usually with a totally new person. It's at least 3 months before we test a max. But what we do is we go double overhand until they can't, and then we start switching. And even after that, every day we go double overhand until we get to a point in our warm ups where we need to switch. Like me, I'll go in and deadlift and I'm double overhand until that's tough for today. Now switch it up, because if we get your double overhand grip to get better. Your grip's going to get stronger. So,
yeah.
Oh, yeah.
And then the average person, I just tell them to do whatever's comfortable, really. But sometimes I'll have people switch it up, like, okay, go right hand over, left hand under, now vice versa. Me, because of my bicep surgeries, I just have one way I have to do it. But I'll have people switch it up. And but usually you'll find your comfortable grip, which one works for you as far as a competitor goes. If they're a competitor, find out which one, now you stick with that. Because you need to make that your normal. I don't need you walking up the platform. Which hand am I going to put under? You need to know that.
For starters.
But no matter what, I always have people, like all our warm ups are done double overhand. So we stay there as long as we can. And then I got a few people that are hook gripping. So I've got one girl that's amazing. She should be pulling 600 in January, double overhand hook grip. So
Jesus.
Yeah. So.
All right.
Yeah, it's like I understand the physics of hook grip, but I know some freaks like Lane Norton that don't practice it and will deadlift 700 hook grip and no problem, but it just feels horrible.
Like the highest I got when I blew my second bicep, I decided, okay, I'm going to go hook grip for as long as I can during recovery. And I made it to 650, and that's all I could do. But I've got short thumbs. I've got big, meaty palms and short.
That's not going to help.
My thumb would pop out. So I just couldn't get past that, and the pain was just, oh man, it's not fun. Weightlifters are crazy. So but yeah, I mean, if you can do it, I think it's a very viable lift. I think it's probably, honestly, if we look at it, it's probably anatomically better for you.
Totally, yeah.
But now we anatomically better in the real world have to meet somewhere, and if I want to move as much weight as possible, I probably can't do that. So, yeah.
I always think that's a contrast too, because physics will tell you, according to physics, what is the most efficient path to move the bar, and everyone will pretty much agree on what that is.
Yeah.
But then you throw in lifting experience and especially anatomical differences, and maybe you've always pulled conventional, so sumo, you just can't get your hips wide enough, even though that may be the best thing by physics.
Yes.
I think that's where the art of coaching is how close can we get you there, but we don't want you to be in pain. We don't want you to rip up your acetabular surface either.
For sure. Yeah. I mean, I have people that probably should lift sumo, but they don't have the hip mobility.
Yeah.
So, okay, well, we can't do that. So we're going to do this. We're going to get you as close as we can for your personal body.
Yeah.
So,
No, that's good tips. I appreciate it. That's awesome.
No worries. If anybody ever wants to come out, just come out. Drop me a line. Our facility is open to anybody. So you can come out for a day and lift with us.
To me, this is just a really good example. It's sort of just learning efficiency. I mean, you can look at slides and pictures and videos and you could probably improve your form in a slow, incremental way, or you could just go ask someone, like, Phil, just show me that, and just cut to the chase, and save yourself months of frustration.
Yeah. Yeah. So.
Okay. Good
stuff. Guys. Have a good one.
Awesome.
Hey listeners, have you seen the store at IronRadio.org? There are 3 halls in the store. One for Phil, one for Fortress, and one for myself, Dr. Lowry, and they're thematic. So you can go into our Halls of Iron store and choose based on your goal. If you need something to learn or read or something nutritional, you can look in my store, Lonnie's store. If you want something about injury prevention or competition, then take a look at Phil's Hall of Iron. And if you want something about motivation or daily training, Fortress's Hall has what you're looking for. There are some fun, heroic descriptors as you browse through the stores. We try to make it a little more fun than the average boring online store. And whether you're a novice lifter or someone more experienced, you can take heart that you're not wasting your time. The things that we put in each Hall of Iron are actually based on our own recommendations. Protein powders that we know to be good, knee sleeves, wraps of some kind, things that Fortress uses in his own training. The stuff you see, is good. This way you don't waste time. So check out the Iron Radio store at ironradio.org and let us know what you think on the forums, and certainly you can request products and we will screen them before they go in. So thanks for listening. Iron Radio is accepting donations. If you like what we do, the professors, the scientists, the bodybuilding show promoters, the athletes themselves in powerlifting and bodybuilding, please consider making a donation or maybe buying something from the ironradio.org store. We also are accepting supporting members. So for $4 a month, which is frankly less than the bank sneaks out of your account in fees, you can step up and support a form of sort of public radio for the bodybuilding and powerlifting and strength community. The Iron Radio podcast and all of the audio on ironradio.org is for informational purposes only. If you're interested in starting a diet or exercise program, it's important to check with your physician. Also seek the help of registered dietitians, athletic trainers, and qualified exercise physiologists in order to make the progress that you need.